record right now, and I will share my screen. There we go. Okay. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining me tonight. My name is Jonathan Newsma. I'm the council member from the 4th Ward here in Evanston, and I am the chair of the Redistricting Committee. So it's my my pleasure and my honor to kick off the redistricting process with this town hall. Thank you for joining us tonight. Give me 1 second because I'm managing the IT here. There we go. Good. All right. So our agenda for the evening, I will run you through a presentation that shows you what we've been thinking so far, and outlines the process we're looking at. We'll have an opportunity to do some questions and answers at the end of the presentation. We're going to do a couple of quick online real-time polls as we run through the program. It's an experiment. We haven't done this before, so we'll see how it works, but hold your real questions and answers until the end. And we're going to follow this up with an online survey that you can complete in real time. And that link will be posted online. So right now we're going to start with the first experimental online poll question, which is, what ward are you in? I'm launching that right now, and we'll see how this works. I think that should be popping up on everybody's screens. We'll give this a few seconds. Can somebody give me a verbal acknowledgement that they see this? I see Betty waving a hand. I only see a few folks on the screen, Betty and Mary Beth, so good. The poll is live. I'm not seeing any results come in. Luke, am I supposed to see those results?
Probably not until they complete the questions. I also was going to ask, just make sure you double check the waiting room in case anyone is in the waiting room.
Oh, I need to let people in. Thank you.
I filled out the question and I pressed submit, but I'm not sure that it's been submitted.
Okay. Well, like I said, this was an experiment, and we will see. I'm going to click end poll right now. We'll just see what happens. We'll go with that. And I'm going to say share results, and nothing's coming up there. So, all right. Lessons in the process of being learned here. Sorry, go ahead, Luke.
I'm sorry. We've got about 23 people that just joined, which is great.
Okay, awesome. Welcome, everybody. And Luke, do I need to keep checking the waiting room here?
Actually, if you'd like to make me a co-host, I can keep the tabs on that for you.
Okay, stand by. I'm gonna have to find you, and Luke Stowe, make co-host. There we go. Okay, Luke, you are now co-host. So, all right, failed attempts to do a quick online poll and see who's here from what ward, but hopefully we've got all 9 wards represented. So we will charge ahead. And like I said, our purpose here is to just launch the process, go through some initial Q&A, get some preliminary feedback. And I want to make clear that this is not going to be the only opportunity for input in this process. We're going to take this process and do some very deliberate and intentional public engagement. We'll get to those details a little bit later. So this is just a kickoff, not the only opportunity to weigh in. I want to thank my colleagues on the Redistricting Committee in numerical order. This is Councilmember Nguyen, Councilmember Burns, and Councilmember Reed. The 4 of us were appointed by the Rules Committee, or essentially the City Council, to this special Redistricting Committee. That committee was created in December of last year, and we're supported by the City of Evanston's legal department. So I'm going to get right into it now and talk about why we are redistricting, why we're even talking about this. There are federal guidelines that come into place. There are state guidelines and some local guidelines. And really the governing law of the land is the most important here, the Constitution of the United States. And most especially the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. And this is a whole semester's worth of discussion, or maybe even a graduate degree's worth of discussion here. I'm not qualified to teach that class, so we're going to keep it really short and to the point here. And just point out that the Equal Protection Clause is that part of the Constitution which guarantees us the one person, one vote concept. That's been supplemented by the Voting Rights Act of 1965. The Voting Rights Act is what gets into ensuring adequate minority representation. Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act prohibits denial or abridgment of the right to vote based on race, based on color, based on minority language status, that kind of thing. And as with any kind of federal policy, this has been informed by case law throughout the years. And the case law has answered, at least for the federal congressional districts, the question of how equal is equal. Now, theoretically, if you're balancing wards or districts, they should all be identically equal in population. Obviously, in practical reality, that's not possible. So case law has said that anything within a 10% total deviation can be regarded as equal enough. 10% deviation means if you take the biggest ward and the smallest ward, if the biggest ward, for example, is 5% above average and the smallest ward, say, is 4% below average, 5 plus 4 is 9. That's 9% total deviation or population deviation. 9 is less than 10%, so we pass that federal test. Anything between 10 and 16.4% is okay, perhaps, if it can be justified based on some other considerations. Anything above 16.4% is regarded as unconstitutional. This is at least for federal congressional districts. So a little bit closer to home, state law, it really is what governs us here in the city of Evanston. State law includes the Illinois Municipal Code, which addresses when and how we redistrict. The question is, are we required to redistrict? According to state law, we are only required to redistrict if our population falls below 70,000 or grows above 90,000. And we're still in that band right now. But can we redistrict if we want to anyway? Yes, we certainly can. The state law explicitly allows us to redistrict for any other reason. It does specify that if we do redistrict, that the wards shall be nearly as equal in population, of course, and the wards shall be of compact and contiguous territory as practicable. So as practicable, that gets into the no excessive gerrymandering kind of requirement. So that's what state law has to say on the topic. So what about our local law, Evanston City Code? Evanston City Code specifies 9 wards, at least it does now, it didn't always, but it doesn't offer any additional explicit guidance into how to redistrict or what factors to take into account. In past practice, we have taken additional criteria into account. So as an example of our most recent past practice, which goes back to 2003, the ordinance which formalized the new districts at that time explicitly enumerated these criteria that were considered 20 years ago. The federal and state criteria that we've just run through, and then these additional local criteria. Geographic boundaries, of course, that makes common sense. Natural and man-made and woman-made, I might add. We're allowed to consider those. We also want to, at least in 2003, it was important to minimize voter confusion. Also in 2003, communities of interest were taken into account when drawing the ward maps. I want to make sure that we understand communities here not to mean neighborhoods per se, but kind of interest group type communities. So residential property owners, municipal taxpayers, et cetera. What you see listed here were the communities of interest explicitly listed in the 2003 ordinance. We're not limited to following exactly what they did 20 years ago, but this is a starting point for a discussion anyway. Also, in 2003, traditional Evanston neighborhoods were taken into account, as was protection of incumbency. I was a little bit surprised to see that explicitly stated, but it was there in the 2003 ordinance. So moving forward, one of the things that the committee is going to be asking for input on is what should these additional criteria be? This is a good starting point. If we're fine with this, great, we can move on. If we want to add or subtract, we have the opportunity to do that as we go along. So quickly recapping, should we redistrict? According to state law, we don't have to. Our population remains within that boundary of 70 to 90,000, same place we've been for the last 50 years. Population isn't quite back up to where it was in 1970, but state law does not compel us to redistrict. If we look at the Voting Rights Act, though, and this is what gets into the ward demographics, at this point, the discussion gets a little bit more interesting. What we're looking at here is a chart that compares ward populations and demographics from the 2010 census to the most recent census, the 2020 census. And what we see here is that we still have 3 wards which are majority non-white, the 2nd, 5th, and 8th wards. The exact proportions have shifted a little bit, which is to be expected over time. But the general trend remains true today as it was 10 years ago, that 2nd, 5th, and 8th are majority non-white. Interesting to note here that every ward has increased in population, except for the 1st ward, which shrunk a little bit. And it doesn't jump out at you you can't add up all these numbers in your head quickly, but our overall population has increased 4.9% in the last 10 years. The Black population, however, has shrunk by almost 7%. The white population has also shrunk by about 5.6%. Notably, the Asian population has increased 21%. Somebody might be looking at this map and thinking there is a demographic group that's missing. And so I want to shift to this next slide, which looks at Hispanic and the Latinx population, which the census counts differently, since we can have white Hispanics, we can have Black Hispanics, we can have Native American Hispanics. So according to the census, the Hispanic population is tracked separately, but it's a growing population in Evanston. And this is maybe one of the more interesting things that has happened in the last 10 years. Our overall Hispanic or Latinx population is up by 30% citywide. It's up in all wards. By numbers, the 4th and 8th ward grew the most, with about 400 residents each. Percentage-wise, it's the 3rd ward that grew the most, with an increase in the Hispanic population of 61%. So I am showing you these screens, which I thought I'm sorry if anyone, if everyone could mute themselves here, we'd appreciate that. I'm sharing this map with you. I'm not sure how easy it is to digest, and then I'm not sure what the resolution is going to be on your screen, but what we're attempting to do here is show graphically how the demographics of Evanston have shifted from 2010 to 2020. And we can see that the 2nd, 5th, and 8th wards remain the most diverse wards. So let's keep that in mind as we move forward. But I think maybe the most compelling argument in favor of redistricting is the equal representation requirement. And going back to that federal guidance that says that ideally 10% or less total population deviation is acceptable, and anything above 16.4% is not acceptable. What we're looking at here in Evanston is our ward populations have grown out of whack over the years, and our total population deviation right now is 20.4%. The third ward is the largest ward, about 11.7% above average, and it's the ninth ward that's the smallest ward at this point, 8.7% above average. So this the population having grown out of whack like that, does really seem to indicate that we should redistrict. And at this point, if our online polls were working, I was going to ask everyone the simple question, do you think we should redistrict? Yes or no? So I can't see everybody on the screen right now, but either throw up a hand or a thumbs up, or maybe give some kind of indication whether you or not you think it's a good idea to redistrict. I see of the thumbs I see, it's unanimous, put it that way. Not a surprising conclusion. Before, I'm going to leave you with a cliffhanger, and before I get to the discussions of the redistricting committee on that very question, I want to take a little bit of an interesting look back.
I have a question really quick. So at the look back before we move forward, 1924.
Yes.
With
I'm sorry, I apologize profusely for that rude interruption. Can everybody still hear me? Betty, I see you.
Yes, I
give me a
can.
thumbs up. Okay. Everyone
hear
else, I'm sorry, I can hear you, but I'm going to ask you to please mute yourself. And
oh, yes, sir.
And Luke, if you have the opportunity or the ability to make sure everyone else is muted, with apologies to folks who want to be an intelligent part of this conversation. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to do that. So back to the program here. A look back before we move forward. This is because it's interesting. And I want to give a shout out to Dino Robinson at the Shorefront Legacy Center, who helped provide this historical perspective here. And Dino might be able to shed some more light on this than I can at this point. But back in 1924, we only had 7 wards. Fast forward to 1945, Evanston is now up to 8 wards, starting to look a little bit similar to how we are now. And then we go to 1980. We are now at our full. And the map is starting to look very, close to where we are right now. Let's pay attention here, though. Call your attention to the fact that the 2nd and 4th wards are oriented more east-west than they are right now. And again, for folks who weren't on the Zoom at the very beginning, I've wondered since I moved to Evanston why the wards are numbered in such a haphazard order. Not proposing we redo it. That would confuse the heck out of everybody. But if somebody knows the answer to that question, please email it to me. I'm super curious, and I assume other people are as well. So let's move away from ancient history and into more modern history. And to me, the delineation between those 2 time periods is when I graduated from high school. So I'm class of 1987. We are now in modern history. Looking back to 1992, the map is starting to look closer to how it is today. The issues when we went through this process as a community back in 1992 were minority representation and the Voting Rights Act, and making sure that the minority populations in Evanston had adequate representation on the city council. And that's one of the reasons we saw the boundary between the 2nd and 4th ward start to shift there. There was an issue with a concern, I should say, with student representation back in 1992. In fact, there was actually a Northwestern student who was running for city council back then. The issue of neighborhood integrity was also referenced as an issue, and I suppose that might be kind of the flip side of the minority representation question. Also on the table in 1992 was downtown representation. And this is the first map where downtown Evanston was split between 3 different aldermen. So it wasn't the purview and domain of only one member of the city council, but the downtown has at least 3 folks looking out for it here. The process back then seemed to be largely community driven. Michael Peshkin, professor at Northwestern, was deeply involved, and thanks Dr. Peshkin for providing some of the context here, and he gave me these press clippings from back then. So let's keep moving forward to 2003, which is actually the last time we redistricted. So the 2003 map should look identical to our current map, because in fact it is the current map. Going back into the Wayback Machine, I pulled up some city council minutes from 2001 when Lorraine Morton, who was still alderman at that time, was wondering about what that process was, what the redistricting process would be, and said it was problematic last time and wanted to avoid those problems this time, and thought we could do so if we knew who was going to do it and what the legal parameters were. So here I am 20 years later trying to follow Mayor Morton's guidance from 2001. What happened in 2003 was that the responsibility for this, for redistricting, was assigned to the Rules Committee, which is a committee of the whole, essentially all members of the city council, the 9 council members and the mayor. The Rules Committee met at least 5 times to discuss redistricting. There were some other public meetings, some unofficial residents, committee meetings. This process created 15 different maps, which did not make for an efficient conversation. So I understand, I wasn't here yet, but from the folks that I've talked to who were, I understand the process was fairly fraught, and nonetheless, we made it through to the end and approved the new map. The city council approved the new map in December of 2003. So census happens every 10 years. We're kind of obligated to have a look at this every 10 years. So fast forward another 10 years, in 2012, the question came before the city council: did we want to redistrict based on the 2010 census? And
excuse me?
I'm sorry, I'm not gonna take any questions right now.
Oh.
With apologies, I'm not gonna be tracking the chat. We can do some questions and answers at the end of the presentation, if that's all right. So in 2010, the population of Evanston had only increased by 247 people. So according to state law, we did not have to redistrict. And the council at the time talked about this and recalled the 2003 process as being, you see the words here, difficult, painful, unpleasant, and expensive. And they made the decision back then not to redistrict. So that finally brings us to where we are today, here in 2022. And in 2022, the responsibility for this process has been assigned to the Special Redistricting Committee, which I explained at the beginning. This committee is meeting the 4th Tuesday of every month. So far, we've met twice. We've met in May and June. And that cliffhanger I left you with, should we redistrict? That was the first thing that the redistricting committee discussed. And we came to the clear conclusion that yes, we do need to redistrict, and we're launching this process to make sure we're doing that properly. We have also concluded that it's important to continue having at least 3 wards that are majority non-white. And we also talked about a philosophical approach. How are we going to approach this? Are we going to throw the map out and start over? Or do we want to try and keep it simple and just adjust some borders here and there so we can make those numbers match as evenly as possible? And as long as we're meeting our demographic requirements and the other requirements that we have yet to discuss, we can maybe get to where we're going without much pain and angst. And that is certainly my hope and desire here, that through this kind of deliberate process and logical approach that of getting community input, that we can get through this with a minimal amount of drama. Because certainly we've had enough of that in this community, and I think with some robust and productive community engagement here, we can set an example for how redistricting can be done in other communities around the state and around the country. So, thank you to my fellow committee members for being part of this process, and I'll share with you. Here's our overall plan. We're kicking it off this evening with this town hall in English, and repeating this town hall in Spanish next week. City Clerk Stephanie Mendoza is going to be hosting that one. And then for the next 5 months, we are going to host coordinated public engagement sessions. Those will be done at the committee meetings on the fourth Thursday of the month. I'm going to explain a little bit more about that approach on the next slide. For now, I just want to highlight the overall approach. And so we're going to take the next 5 months to get that input. And then in December, the plan is for the committee to take all this input into account. And at that point, we will draft several maps based on the input we receive. Is it going to be 1 map, 2 maps, 3 maps? Maybe kind of the same discussion as with the city manager search. We'll see how the process, where the process takes us. And we intend to release at least 1 proposed map, maybe 2 or 3, in January of 23. And then the public will have an opportunity to review those maps along with all the demographics that go with them. And the committee will take input on those, semi-finalist maps in February and April. Then in April, the committee will make our selection as a committee to recommend the new map that would then go to the city council for approval in May of 2023. So that's the overall process. And this is actually as quick as we can do it. Reason being is we do not want to publish the new map until after the special election, which is going to happen in April of 2023. Because we've had some resignations on the city council and the 2nd Ward and the 8th Ward. Those seats, 2nd Ward has been filled, the 8th Ward, 8th Ward, 9th Ward, 9th Ward vacancy has been filled. The 2nd Ward vacancy will be filled within the next few months, but both of those council members will have to stand for election in April of 23, like halfway through my term and everyone else's term. And so we don't want to confuse people by releasing the new map before that election, because the new map will not really go into effect until the 25 election. Everyone will continue to be represented by their current council members in their current wards through the election in April 2025. And then once the new council is sworn in May of 2025, that's when people who have shifted wards will find themselves in a new ward. So we don't want to confuse the 23 election by publishing that map too soon. We're still way ahead of the state guidelines, which say that we have to only get this done by November of 2024, which is way too late for an election that's coming up 6 months later. So we're well ahead of our state guidelines here and doing it as quickly as we can, given our local constraints. So a little bit more on our plan for public engagement here. Like I said, the committee meetings are going to be the primary venue for that engagement. Committee meetings are the 4th Tuesdays of every month at 7 p.m. We are in person at the Civic Center, but they will also be broadcast virtually. So if you can make it in person, great. We may have some maps up on the wall to kind of facilitate discussion, but if you can only make it online, we will accommodate you as best we can. It's important to get input, however we can. Again, we're requesting input really on 2 things. First, the criteria we should be taking into account when we're redrawing the map, and also specific input on where to draw the boundaries. You prefer it to be on this block, or you prefer it to be on this block, but don't put it on this block. That kind of input is also what we're looking for. Now, in order to have an efficient discussion here, we are requesting folks to follow this schedule according to what ward you live in. We've kind of arranged this to balance some of the more difficult wards or wards that we anticipate being more difficult to redistrict with some of the ones that are more easy to redistrict, so we can have enough time to take care of everybody here. So we're not exactly numerical. We've switched it around a little bit to make sure we have enough time to accommodate everybody here. So the request is, if you would like to weigh in with your input, you are certainly invited. The request is, please try to come to the ward meeting or to the committee meeting at which your ward is scheduled for discussion. That's not an absolute requirement. If you live in the 5th ward and you're on vacation on September 27th, you could come to one of the other wards or one of the other committee meetings. You're welcome there. You're also welcome to submit feedback directly to the committee. You can look at the website for how to do that. So that is our overall plan for public engagement. And at this point, I'm going to stop screen sharing and see if we can do some questions and answers here. And Luke, are you still online?
I am, Councilmember. Probably the best thing would be if people could raise their hand, then we'll ask them to unmute.
Great, great. So let's do it that way. I will take, I know there's somebody who has very politely been wanting to ask a question. If you could raise your hand, I will take that question. I don't see anybody raising anybody's hands. So am I to conclude we have sufficiently and adequately addressed everybody's concerns at this point? Damien is there. I will call on Damien to unmute, or do I have to unmute Damien? Damien had his hand raised. Can Damien unmute himself, or can he request to unmute himself? There we go. Damien, you were unmuted for a second. If you'd like to go ahead, sir. Okay, I do see that Betty Hayford has her hand raised. So Betty, over to you. If you would like to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I had a question about, well, Ward 7. I mean, you mentioned having contiguous connected geometric wards as one possible goal, one possible measure.
Yeah.
And in my looking at the ward map, Ward 7 is the most convoluted ward, and I wondered whether you've had that same thought, and whether you think that Ward 7 is the most likely to be reshaped, or whether it's too early to even make that comment.
I don't want to jump ahead, because that's why we're setting up the process to receive these inputs. So I could offer you my own personal opinion as a private citizen, but that wouldn't be appropriate. My job here is to ask for the personal private opinions of all the other citizens, so that I, as council member, and my colleagues on the committee can take those into account. I will say that the 7th ward is 4.2% above average. So it's likely that the 7th ward will shrink in population, knowing that ideally we'd like to get to a +0, -0 percentage, across all 9 wards. Realistically, that's not going to happen. So that's all I'm really kind of comfortable saying right now, is that it's likely that the 7th ward will shrink, at least numerically.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Jeff Smith had his hand up. Mr. Smith, you could teach the seminar here, so correct any misstatements, please. And I think you need to. Yes, you're unmuted now.
Yeah. You may not realize this, John, but when you try and unmute yourself, you first get a prompt that says you're not allowed to.
Okay.
So you'll have to allow a couple seconds for people.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, I have taught this, but that doesn't make me, the be all and end all of this subject. There a slight correction to the introductory standards. The deviations that you were on the first slide saying that's okay for Congress, that's not so. Congress, the courts pretty much insist on nearly mathematical exactitude. And then there's a little more leeway for state legislatures, with 10% being presumptively bad if it's more than 10% out of deviation. And then there's sometimes more leeway for municipalities, but the goal is still always one person, one vote. The goal of Evanston shouldn't be to say how much inequality and unequal representation can we get away with and still survive a court challenge. The goal should be equal representation as much as possible and not having a court challenge at all. My major comment would be on the, well, two things. First of all, the history kind of skipped over what happened in 2010, said that we hadn't increased or decreased in population enough to warrant redistricting under state law, but there was no mention of where we were at with regards to deviation under the federal standards, which are really what drive this. And I think it would be good if those numbers were made available and if the census tract by census tract information was generally made available.
Yeah.
With regard to the process going forward, I'd say I really disagree almost 180 degrees with the idea that we've got special elections coming up, so we're going to delay this process. It seems to me that would compel the opposite result. We currently have a sitting council that was elected under an unconstitutional map. This council is making major decisions, including on, say, the next city manager. The next city manager, we found out on June 1st that Mr. Fournier was not going to take the job. And my understanding, reading between the lines from what Mayor Biss said last night at the town hall and from the rumors around town, is that the council has largely decided on a new candidate in less than 6 weeks. How can it take only 6 weeks to come up with a city manager who might be here for the next decade, but we're going to drag out an unconstitutional map for another year and elect 2 more council members under the new terminology, under an unconstitutional map? It seems to me we have the technology and the ability to have a map that meets the requirements of compact, contiguous, and is considerably less gerrymandered than the map we see right now, and that there's compelling reason to have that map in place before these special elections are held in April. I would redistrict the entire city ASAP and give people time to be running. As one of your earlier slides said, you don't have to wait 4 years. You can redistrict. You could redistrict right now. We could hold a special election for everybody in April and be assured that the decisions that are being made over the next couple of years are being made under the standards of one person, one vote, and equal representation for all the wards. So that's my 2 cents.
Thanks, Jeff. And I do have some data that I'd be happy to share with you. Luke, if you could allow me to share my screen again to address your question of the demographic data. I will go ahead and share my screen again. Can you guys, hold on, let me maneuver around and put this in presentation mode. Can you guys see this? Okay,
Yeah.
so this is, I won't go through all these numbers right now in detail, but just want to let you know this information is here as kind of an appendix to this presentation, and this presentation will be posted on the website, so the data will be available for you to look at. So this 2000 census data is right there. The 2010 census data is right here, and specific to your point, Jeff, the total population deviation at that time was 16.3%. So I'm not here to defend the decision or comment on the decision one way or the other that was made in 2012 or 2013. You know, we do find ourselves here in 2020 with a 20.4% deviation, and do intend to make that number as close to zero as reasonably possible. So I just wanted to call your attention to that, the fact that this data is available without getting into those weeds right now. So thanks, Jeff. I see that Tricia Connolly has a question, and is there anybody else? I see Tricia. So, and I guess, Tricia, you're going to have to request to unmute yourself, and then
Yeah, I can.
There we go. Okay, we can hear
I'm
you.
good. I guess my question is, and maybe I'm thinking too far forward, but when we have these breakouts per ward in these meetings down the road, is there going to be access to data that you're going to give the residents in terms of trying to put several things together here on what makes sense? You know, you talked about neighborhoods, you talked about community, like, is all of that going to be parsed out so that we can start thinking about those things? You know, you live in a ward, but you forget some things and you're not sure what the implications are. How's that going to work?
Yeah, so we'll start, I think, with a review of the demographic data that I just flashed on the screen briefly, and we'll take a closer look at the ward that's under consideration at each meeting, and look at those demographics, look at those borders, and then everyone who's in the room can look at the map. And for example, if it's the 7th ward, which is a little bit too big, let's look at areas that that might be reasonably moved to another ward, and keeping in mind that at the end of this process, we want everything to be balanced as close as possible to zero. So we can't finalize that conversation by talking about one ward alone. The point of having kind of ward-centric discussions is to hear concerns related to that ward and the residents of that ward, and from the council member of that ward, and make sure all that input is received. And then once we have all that input from all of the wards, we'll make an attempt at drawing a new map, which is going to involve some trial and error until we can get everything to balance out. So Tricia, I hope that answers your question, but in order to be a productive conversation, folks are going to have information, and we intend to provide that. Open to suggestions as to what additional information might make that a more productive discussion. Thank you, Tricia. Leslie Williams, I saw your hand raised next.
I'm happy to go next. I saw that Bonnie Wilson had a question.
Okay,
so I don't know
thank you.
if Bonnie still wants to ask the
Thank
question
you.
first.
I'm not seeing everybody on my screen at once. So Bonnie, if you'd like to go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
My only question was, and I guess I got on late, is how many more people in this census, how much did we increase in people here? How much?
We increased 4.9%.
What is the number?
Our population is now, according to the US Census, 78,110.
I know, but what was it 10 years ago?
74,486.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And Leslie then. Leslie, you have the floor if you'd like to go.
Sorry, I couldn't unmute.
That's good.
So one really simple question. when you said we'd be doing it incrementally, I'm not quite sure how you would do this incrementally. So if you could maybe explain that. And my other question is if you're looking at any other models of other cities similar to us in size or demographics that have done this.
By incremental, I mean, kind of a light touch approach in getting where we need to go by shifting existing borders in the direction that they need to be shifted in order to get that numerical balance, as opposed to on the other end of the spectrum, throw out the map and start over. So that was the clear consensus of the redistricting committee that we would like to get where we're going with a minimal amount of redistricting and without putting so many people into new wards that it starts to get confusing. So that's what I meant there. And to the point of, have we looked at other communities? We haven't taken a deep dive. We've all may have heard how this process has gone in Chicago. We're not looking to them as a model for sure. But we haven't pulled Oak Park and other communities to look at how they're doing this. Next question, screen name is Our Pals.
Okay, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay. This is Renee Payton, Tina's sister.
Hi, Renee.
I just wanted to know, because there were competing meetings, if you guys were gonna have the recording so people could see what was going on for the initial town hall.
Yes, that is absolutely our intent. We are recording this meeting and it will be posted on the website, assuming all the IT works out, which is always, I guess, a little bit of a question. But yes, it is being recorded and will be posted.
Okay, great. Thanks. That's all I had.
Okay. Anybody else? Anybody else? Right, before we log off here, I am hoping that, Luke, is there a link to the exit survey, or it's not the exit survey, but the link to the community survey that is kind of the first formal input to this process. And we'll post this link online so folks that are watching this recording can respond to the survey as well. But Luke, is there a link to that survey that we can post?
I think we'll go ahead and just post it on the redistricting webpage, and we can get that up tomorrow.
Okay, that sounds good. Yes, I would encourage everyone to have a look at the redistricting webpage and fill out that survey. It's going to ask you what ward you live in currently, how long you've lived there. It's going to ask you for some input on, if you have any input on what criteria we should be considering. It's going to ask you for your thoughts on this proposed process and any suggestions we can have to make it better. So it will be informative and useful to the committee to hear your feedback. So please have a look at that survey tomorrow, and we'll make sure that the survey is publicized as well. All right. Are there any other questions? Deborah Jetzer or Yetzer, I see your hand raised.
Yes, thank
and
you.
Also, and also I see Elizabeth Meadows' hand raised here as well. So let's go to Deborah and then Elizabeth.
Okay, thank you. My question is, does the city currently use a redistricting software to make the maps?
We are using some online software that uses the 2010 or the 2020 census data. Same software is available free to anyone who wants to use it. One of the things that hopefully will make this process easier than in past decades is that the software is readily available. The technology makes it easier to test hypothetical maps and do some really rapid analysis. So we got technology working in favor of us this time around.
Okay, and I, just as a follow-up, I did a really quick Google search, and it seems like there's a lot of software out there. Do you know, is there software that's sophisticated enough where you can load your current district maps or ward maps? And you can actually then manipulate boundaries, so it's.
Yes,
really
yes, there is.
simple?
Yeah, that is,
Okay.
yeah, that's exactly what.
Okay,
what we're doing.
fantastic. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, and we'll probably, I anticipate that we may be doing some playing around with that software in these upcoming committee meetings where we'll be looking at different wards. You know, we'll do some
Okay.
real-time exploration.
Okay,
Keeping
that's
on-
great. Thank you.
Keeping in mind that we're not, the intention of the next 5 months is not to redraw the map in a series of 5 meetings, but to take some input that would allow a holistic approach to redrawing the map. So, Ms. Meadows, thank you for waiting. If you had your hand raised for a while, I apologize. You were on a different screen, so I'm just seeing you now.
Oh, thank you. No, I did not. Thank you. I really appreciate the conversation and the inclusivity. And I agree with Leslie Williams, who asked about comparable models
Mhm.
for other cities, because as a newcomer to this, I wonder how will residents here in Evanston be helped to understand implications of redistricting. And I understand that the committee decided this was a good idea, and I understand the presentation that you gave, but I know too that the 14th Amendment has not always been used for the most socially just purposes. The Constitution can be used for purposes other than actually protecting the rights of residents and citizens. So what's the educational process going to be for these? I understand you want input from residents, but how will residents be able to learn the pros and cons of different practices, the social justice matters, the implications and such of the questions you're asking us to respond to, in terms of, for example, what criteria should be used, or how should the ward be redrawn, or should the ward be withdrawn? I hope my question's making sense. I think we need some background.
So, I mean,
information.
if we're going to have an intelligent discussion, people need to have enough information to be able to, to make some informed contributions, I think is where you're going here. And so in a certain sense, it's up to the individuals to do their own research here, but we will also, I think your request, Elizabeth, is well noted, that if there is material that we can make available to help people bring themselves up to speed, that's something that that would be a valuable thing for the committee to do. I would agree. I would agree. All right, looking at the question, at the hands raised here, is there anybody else that has not been called on who wishes to speak? If not, I see Jeff Smith, your hand is still raised. Is that again, or is that left over from the last time? Giving...
this is a new question,
okay,
or comment, and just so others besides you know where I'm coming from. I cut my legal teeth while in law school, working down in Texas to try and with East Texas Legal Services to make sure that African American and Latino voters had a fair chance to elect representatives of their choice in cities that had gerrymandered away the ability of folks to do so, and ended up doing an enormous amount of research and ended up writing my law school thesis on that, and developed a election law curriculum that I taught a couple times that began with a focus on redistricting. And I believe fiercely in the right of everybody, and especially those who've been discriminated against, to have a fair chance to elect representatives of their choice. I also know and like and respect Michael Peshkin, and I was actually at some of the discussions before the 1990s redistricting. It was probably the first Evanston City Council meeting I ever attended. I disagree somewhat with the narrative of that as being driven by racial considerations, because the law was and is that you don't have to draw lines along race. In fact, you probably shouldn't draw lines along considerations of race unless there's a demonstrated pattern of what's called racially polarized voting, such that doing so would impede the fair chance of a group to elect a representative of its own choice, which doesn't necessarily mean a representative of the same racial or ethnic background as the group. It means choice. Under the American theory of democracy, I can vote for a person of color to represent me. Persons of color can vote for a white person to represent them, and they can represent their interests sometimes better than somebody who has more similarity pigment-wise. And the problem was in 1992, and the problem with that narrative was that there was not then such a demonstrable pattern of racially polarized voting, and there certainly isn't now after all the intervening elections we've had since, having had elected folks of color citywide in both municipal and school board elections, with the intervening elections for Carol Moseley Braun, for Barack Obama, a lot of other folks that I've supported. So I would be extremely careful if I were the city of Evanston to start using racial boundaries or perceived demographics of racial groups as a criteria, unless you have that demonstrated pattern of racially polarized voting with respect to particular groups and particular areas. Otherwise, you're really starting to tread on something that's the opposite of what is constitutionally mandated. And I recognize that there are some themes in modern political discourse that that aren't as enthusiastic about the ideal of colorblindness that was espoused in the leading cases for decades on redistricting, but nonetheless those remain the law of the land, and there is no affirmative duty to maximize the power of any particular racial group when drawing lines, because that's a zero-sum game. If you're maximizing one group, you're minimizing some other group, and that is constitutionally forbidden. So that's my only comment on with regard to that, and it goes back decades at this point. But somebody wiser than me said that those who don't study history are doomed to repeat its mistakes.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for that. Thanks for that feedback. And you certainly are one who could teach a semester on this for sure, or two. Anyone else wishing to comment? There was a gentleman who was attempting to ask a question earlier in the presentation who I unfortunately had to cut off. If that gentleman, I'm not sure who it was, is still available, they're still online. Would love to hear your question. Maybe you've already left, or maybe your question has already been answered. So, all right. I don't see any more hands raised. So I will at this point say thank you everybody for participating in this town hall tonight. Please look for that survey online at the city's website tomorrow and provide your preliminary feedback. And I look forward to seeing you all at the upcoming series of committee meetings, and we'll get more into the weeds on what this new map is going to look like. So thank you all for participating. I am going to call this meeting adjourned. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.